No, Meghan is not invited to my upcoming Santa Barbara event. I have no involvement with the Epstein matter. Prince Andrew and Meghan do. She made an advance toward me. I did not respond. I'm just there. I've made a promise to myself that I'm going to make these, that I'm making them for an audience. And when I'm done, I'm going to feel like, okay, that was what I was supposed to do. And they live forever. Good or bad, they live forever.
Just when the royal drama looked like it was cooling off, boom, something wild hits the spotlight. Kevin Costner has reportedly stepped in with claims that could seriously shake the polished image tied to Meghan Markle, and people are paying attention. Fast. As everything started unfolding, insiders say Prince Harry was completely caught off guard by what came out. A secret people had been whispering about for a long time is now allegedly out in the open, sending waves through both Hollywood and royal circles. So, what did Costner actually say? And why does this moment feel like it could flip everything people thought they knew? It all started when Hollywood's doors didn't slam shut, but quietly shifted. The change kicked off in a place nobody expected, just a calm conversation tied to a charity event along the California coast. The setting was Santa Barbara, home to the well-known 1805 Live Benefit, one of those rare events where power and charity mix without making too much noise. This was never just another celebrity fundraiser. It carried real weight behind the scenes. For years, this event has been seen as a private hub where major players in film, media, and entertainment connect and shape what happens next. Getting an invite meant something, and just showing up said you were part of that inner circle. But during a discussion about the future of the event, Kevin Costner dropped a statement that instantly changed the energy in the room. Costner, known in Hollywood as a respected actor, director, and producer, has always carried that old-school, independent vibe. He's not the type to chase drama or throw bold statements around for attention. But this time, his words hit differently, clear, direct, and impossible to ignore. He reportedly said Meghan Markle would not be invited to future gatherings at his private estate connected to the event. People in the room felt it right away. This wasn't just casual talk, it felt like a line being drawn. Conversations slowed, reactions were subtle but serious, and you could feel the tension move across the room. In a space where people usually choose their words carefully, something like this doesn't just happen without a deeper story behind it, and when it does, it spreads fast. This wasn't just about who makes the guest list. This ran way deeper than that. The 1805 Live Benefit in Santa Barbara has slowly turned into a powerful symbol of elite networking in the entertainment world, where real decisions quietly take shape. Producers, executives, investors, and major creatives don't just show up for charity. They show up to lock in connections that can shape entire projects. Getting invited into that space isn't loud or flashy, but it carries serious weight. It signals status, influence, and access to rooms where big moves happen behind closed doors. For the past few years, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have been trying to secure their place inside that same Hollywood system after stepping away from their royal duties in the UK. Moving to Montecito wasn't random. It was a strategic move, hoping to stay close to the people who control media power. But Costner's decision hinted that something behind the scenes might be shifting, and not in a small way. Industry watchers quickly picked up on it, suggesting this could reflect a quiet change in how top insiders feel. In Hollywood, people rarely say things directly, but doors open and close all the time without explanation, and that silence speaks volumes. Some insiders believe this moment points to a bigger issue. The Sussex brand, once seen as a powerful mix of royal status and Hollywood ambition, might now be getting a more cautious reaction from key decision makers. At the event, Prince Harry still stepped on stage, smiling, shaking hands, and playing the part as cameras flashed. But underneath all that polished energy, something felt off and people noticed. Across Hollywood's inner circles, a subtle, but real shifts seemed to move through the room. As Kevin Costner spoke and Prince Harry kept smiling for the spotlight, insiders couldn't ignore the tension building beneath it all. The support that once came easily may not be as solid anymore. And in a place like Hollywood, that kind of change can mean everything. As the impact of Kevin Costner's earlier remarks started spreading through Hollywood circles, attention snapped right back to the night where the whispers first began. The setting was the 1805 Live Benefit in Santa Barbara, an event that, on the surface, looked flawless and full of celebration. Cameras captured that familiar glow of a high-profile charity night along the California coast, making everything seem perfectly in place. Guests showed up dressed sharp in elegant evening wear, moving through conversations across the stunning seaside estate. Industry power players, philanthropists, and celebrities blended together under the warm Santa Barbara night, creating what looked like another successful and polished gathering. To anyone watching the official footage, it all felt smooth, impressive, and completely on track. But for the people who were actually in that room, the memory hits different. Eyewitnesses later shared that something about the energy felt off, not aggressive, not confrontational, but noticeably distant in a way that experienced Hollywood insiders couldn't ignore.
Support tent, and it was some peer supporters from LA County Fire Department, and man, they were incredible. They related to me. We had a really quick, deep connection because we both.
It wasn't loud, but it was there, and that's what made it stand out. In spaces like this, where influence moves through quiet signals, body language can say more than words ever could. And that night, people were watching closely when Prince Harry stepped on stage to accept his award. On the surface, everything played out perfectly. Applause filled the air, cameras flashed nonstop, and Harry looked calm and confident while speaking to the crowd. But behind that polished moment, a different story was unfolding. Those watching from inside the room noticed the subtle interactions happening around the stage, and they didn't match the energy seen on camera. Several insiders described Kevin Costner's vibe as unusually reserved throughout the night, far from the open and welcoming tone you'd expect from a host at an event like this. His interactions with Meghan Markle stayed short and controlled. Polite nods, quick acknowledgements, but nothing beyond that. There was no tension you could point to, no arguments, no dramatic scenes, but that's exactly what made it feel so noticeable. In Hollywood's carefully managed social world, it's often what doesn't happen that ends up saying the most. Tension like this doesn't usually show up through loud arguments. It creeps in through what's missing. A conversation that never starts, a greeting that ends too fast, a moment that feels cut short. Guests at the event quietly started comparing what they noticed, and the vibe didn't go unnoticed. Some believed the distance was completely intentional, while others felt something had already shifted behind the scenes before anyone even arrived. According to certain industry sources, there were private talks happening between agencies and representatives tied to the guest list. A few insiders even suggested that Costner may have felt pressure from powerful talent agencies to make sure Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were placed alongside other major names. But that idea didn't sit right with everyone, and for good reason. People who know Costner's long career weren't buying that explanation so easily. This is someone who built his reputation on independence and standing firm, no matter the pressure. He's known for setting clear boundaries and sticking to them. So the idea of him being pushed into anything raised eyebrows fast. And even during the event, that quiet distance never faded. It stayed noticeable the entire time, leaving people questioning what was really going on. For those who understand Costner's track record, the situation felt deeper than just awkward timing. Why would someone known for strong personal limits allow such a strange and uncomfortable dynamic to unfold? That question only grew louder after one quiet remark started making its way around, and once it did, everything changed. What started as subtle tension at a charity event quickly escalated into something way more serious. In the days that followed, a comment reportedly linked to Kevin Costner began spreading through media circles and private industry conversations like wildfire. Suddenly, that calm distance people noticed didn't seem so harmless anymore. It felt loaded. According to reports circulating among insiders, Costner allegedly mentioned Meghan Markle in connection to the long shadow of the Jeffrey Epstein controversy. The statement was brief, but the reaction was immediate and intense. It sent shockwaves through both Hollywood and royal circles, leaving people stunned and trying to piece together what it could really mean. In both Hollywood and royal circles, the name Epstein carries serious weight. It's not something people brush off or ignore. The scandal tied to the late financier already dealt one of the hardest blows to the modern British monarchy, and the impact is still being felt today. Prince Andrew's connection to Epstein triggered years of intense scrutiny, legal trouble, and public backlash that refused to fade. That controversy pushed Andrew out of royal duties and forced him to step away from public life completely. Photos, court documents, and testimonies linked to the case left a permanent mark, not just on him, but on the image of the monarchy itself. Because of that history, even the slightest suggestion linking another royal figure to anything similar carries massive consequences that can't be taken lightly. Over time, scattered rumors involving Meghan Markle have popped up in small corners of the internet, usually buried in forums or fringe discussions. These claims were never verified and were mostly dismissed by credible sources due to a lack of real evidence or trustworthy voices backing them up. For the most part, they stayed in the background, just noise in the middle of endless online speculation. But everything shifted the moment a well-known Hollywood figure seemed to reference the topic publicly. Kevin Costner isn't some random voice online or a tabloid writer chasing headlines. He's an Oscar-winning actor and filmmaker with decades of influence and respect in the industry. His reputation for professionalism and independence makes anything he says land harder and spread faster. Once that comment started circulating, the reaction was immediate and intense. Conversations sparked behind closed doors as executives, producers, and insiders across Los Angeles began trying to make sense of it all. In an industry where reputation can open doors or slam them shut, any link, even indirect, to a scandal of that level raises serious concerns. Media strategists and corporate advisors quickly stepped in, watching the situation closely because they know how fast narratives can spiral when high-profile names get involved. At the same time, the story didn't stay contained. It crossed the Atlantic and reached London, where royal advisors immediately started paying attention. Inside royal circles, protecting the monarchy's image is everything, especially after the damage already caused by the Epstein scandal. With that history still fresh, even whispers of a similar connection are enough to trigger serious concern behind palace walls. The fallout from Prince Andrew's situation was already a major scar on the monarchy, and anything that even hinted at reopening that chapter instantly set off alarms inside palace communications teams. This wasn't something they could afford to take lightly. Not again. Right in the middle of this growing situation was Prince Harry, once again, pulled into pressure.
And then it clicks, and then and that's what happens when and I was going to let them know, no, I'm not doing this. In this way, it's not going to happen. I'm not in that mix.
He didn't exactly sign up for. After already dealing with family tension and nonstop public attention, stepping away from royal duties was supposed to create distance. But now he found himself indirectly tied to yet another controversy, connected to the same institution he once represented. What started as an uncomfortable moment at a charity event in Santa Barbara didn't stay small for long. That quiet tension between individuals quickly turned into something much bigger, a public narrative with the power to impact reputations, relationships, and entire institutions on both sides of the Atlantic. At the center of it all stood Prince Harry, caught once again in royal turbulence that doesn't seem to let go. What looked like a simple, awkward interaction suddenly began spiraling across continents. People started asking, is this just personal tension, or the early signs of something bigger building behind palace walls? As talk surrounding Kevin Costner's remarks spread through Hollywood and international media, the ripple effect reached one of the most tightly controlled environments in the world, Buckingham Palace. Inside those walls, where reputation is everything, advisors immediately began tracking the situation closely and quietly. As reports moved between American and British outlets, the story started shifting from celebrity gossip into something far more serious. Palace officials had to consider whether this growing narrative could eventually circle back and affect the monarchy itself, and that possibility alone was enough to raise concern. And the timing couldn't have been worse. In 2026, the royal family was already dealing with one of its most sensitive periods in years. King Charles III continued facing health challenges that limited his public role, placing more responsibility on a smaller group of senior royals. At the same time, Catherine, Princess of Wales, had stepped back from duties during her own recovery, leaving even fewer figures actively representing the crown. With the monarchy already stretched thin, the institution looked more exposed than usual at a time when stability was critical. The last thing palace officials wanted was for any narrative, even indirect, to reconnect the royal family to one of its most damaging modern scandals. For years, the Jeffrey Epstein case has cast a long and heavy shadow, and no one inside those walls is eager to see it surface again. Prince Andrew's connection to Epstein didn't just cause headlines, it triggered nonstop media pressure, legal fights, and public outrage that seriously damaged trust in the monarchy. The fallout was so intense that Andrew had to step away from royal duties, leaving palace advisors scrambling to protect what was left of the institution's credibility. Because of that history, even the smallest reference linking another royal name to that same narrative carries major risk. Inside palace offices, communications, teams immediately started analyzing how fast speculation can spread in today's media world, where stories move on momentum, not proof. Once something goes global, it can grow way beyond the actual facts. And that's where the real danger begins. The idea of Meghan Markle's name appearing anywhere near the Epstein conversation raised instant concern. The monarchy had spent years trying to close that chapter, and the thought of it resurfacing, even indirectly, felt like reopening a wound that never fully healed. Behind closed doors, discussions started getting more intense. Legal advisors, constitutional experts, and senior aides began reviewing scenarios that once seemed unlikely, even extreme. At the center of those talks was a question that hit straight at the core of royal tradition. What happens if reputational damage goes too far? One possibility quietly entered the conversation. Could royal titles ever be removed to protect the crown? It's not a simple move at all. Well, that kind of decision would involve complex legal steps, constitutional challenges, and serious political consequences reaching far beyond Buckingham Palace. But the fact it was even being discussed showed just how seriously officials were taking the situation. What started as tense remarks at a charity event in Santa Barbara was now echoing through the highest levels of royal decision-making. Every angle had to be considered, every outcome carefully planned, as advisors prepared for a situation that could spiral beyond control. Now, a centuries-old rule is suddenly back in focus behind palace walls, and the pressure is building. Advisors are digging into a question that once seemed unthinkable. If scandal threatens the crown, can royal titles actually be stripped away? And what chaos would follow if it happened? As these conversations grew more serious, attention turned toward a law that had been sitting quietly in the background for over 100 years. Inside legal offices and advisory rooms, experts began revisiting the Titles Deprivation Act of 1917, a piece of legislation born during one of the most turbulent times in British history, now suddenly feeling very relevant again. The Titles Deprivation Act didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was created during the chaos of World War I, when the British government faced a serious problem involving aristocrats with royal titles. Some of these figures still had ties to enemy nations, and that raised major concerns while Britain was in active conflict. Several noble families with German connections suddenly became politically sensitive, putting pressure on the government to act fast. To deal with it, Parliament passed a law giving the monarch the power to strip titles from anyone whose actions or loyalties were seen as a threat to the nation. It was a bold move at the time, and one that still carries weight today. The law set a powerful precedent that hasn't disappeared. Royal titles, no matter how historic or prestigious, are not guaranteed forever. They can be taken away if someone is seen as damaging the crown's reputation and your integrity. Even though this rule has existed for over a century, it mostly stayed in the background, rarely used and barely discussed in modern times. Instead, royal controversies have usually been handled in quieter ways, like stepping back from public duties or losing official roles without making things even more dramatic. That approach worked for years, keeping situations controlled without triggering bigger constitutional questions. But recent events have started pushing those limits. The fallout from Prince Andrew's situation gave the monarchy a modern example of just how serious things can get. After facing heavy public backlash over his connection to Jeffrey Epstein, Andrew stepped away from royal duties and lost his military titles and honorary positions. Even though that decision didn't directly involve the 1917 Act, it showed something important. The monarchy is willing to take strong, unprecedented action when its reputation is on the line. And now, according to insiders watching the situation closely, that same level of seriousness is being applied behind the scenes. Reports suggest that advisors have quietly started reviewing whether a similar legal path could ever be considered in relation to Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. That means going over timelines, public statements, and key developments tied to the ongoing controversy in careful detail. But a move like that wouldn't happen quickly or quietly. Invoking the Titles Deprivation Act of 1917 would require a formal constitutional process, layered with legal reviews, political considerations, and intense public attention every step of the way. Legal experts wouldn't just jump into something this serious. They'd have to break everything down carefully to see if the situation even meets the strict threshold required by law. And this wouldn't stay inside palace walls either. The government would likely have to get involved because anything tied to royal titles carries political weight that goes far beyond the monarchy itself. If things actually move forward, it wouldn't stay quiet for long. The issue would spill straight into the public arena, pulling in Parliament and opening the door to intense debates in the House of Commons, and possibly the House of Lords too. Politicians, legal experts, and constitutional scholars would all step in, arguing over precedent, authority, and what it really means to change royal status in modern times. Even the idea of this happening sent shockwaves through royal circles. For generations, royal titles have symbolized stability, tradition, and continuity. So the thought of one being legally stripped in today's world carries massive symbolic impact, and people inside palace corridors know it. What started as quiet concern has now shifted into serious legal evaluation. No official decision has been announced, but the fact that the Titles Deprivation Act of 1917 is even part of the conversation again says everything about how much the situation around the Sussex name has escalated. Behind palace doors, that old law is no longer just history. It's being discussed as a real option. A rule powerful enough to reshape royal status itself is suddenly back on the table. And that raises a bigger question. If the same world that once celebrated Harry and Meghan is now pulling back, what changed behind the scenes? While legal conversations quietly continued inside Britain's royal system, another shift was unfolding thousands of miles away, in California, right in the heart of the entertainment industry. Because in Hollywood, image and influence can be just as valuable as talent, and sometimes even more. For a while, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle positioned themselves right at the center of a new era after settling in Montecito. Their strategy focused on media, projects, philanthropy, and major partnerships with some of the biggest companies in entertainment. At first, that move seemed like a perfect blend. Royal recognition, meeting Hollywood's storytelling power. Doors opened, opportunities lined up, and their presence carried serious attention. But over time, the tone around them started to shift, and people inside the industry began looking at things a little differently. Major platforms and top agencies once saw huge potential in the couple's ability to pull global attention. That part was never in doubt. But once the discussion sparked by Kevin Costner's remarks started spreading, the same industry that welcomed them began to shift its tone. Behind closed doors in Los Angeles boardrooms, executives weren't clapping anymore. They were reviewing deals with a more cautious mindset. Conversations turned sharper, more strategic, and a lot less enthusiastic as questions started building around long-term risk. In today's entertainment world, reputation isn't just important, it's built into the contracts. Most major agreements include morality clauses, designed to protect companies if a public figure becomes tied to controversy that could damage their brand. And when billions of dollars are involved, these decisions aren't personal, they're calculated. For global platforms, the thinking is simple. If a partnership starts creating risk instead of value, it has to be reassessed. One of the biggest examples under the spotlight is the Sussex deal with Netflix, a partnership that once carried massive expectations. When it was first announced, the deal generated serious buzz. It was built around documentaries, series, and storytelling projects meant to mix personal experiences with broader social themes. At the time, it looked like a powerful transition from royal life to major players in the American media space. But as conversations tied to Costner's remarks and the wider controversy kept spreading, industry analysts began looking at things differently. Executives started questioning how this evolving narrative could impact current and future projects tied to the deal. In the digital age, perception can change overnight, and that's where the real pressure hits. Even unverified claims can influence how audiences react, and companies know they have to move fast to protect their brand image. At the same time, another layer of pressure started building around representation. Agencies managing high-profile clients, including firms like WME, which has been linked to Meghan Markle's professional interests, operate in a highly competitive space where results matter. Their job isn't just to secure deals, it's to maintain strong relationships with corporate partners. So when controversy starts surrounding a client, agencies have to think bigger than just one name. They have to consider the impact on their entire portfolio. And in moments like this, every move gets calculated, every decision gets questioned, and nothing is left to chance. What made this moment hit even harder was where the criticism was coming from. For years, negative headlines around Meghan Markle were mostly linked to the British tabloid press, a space often called out for being overly aggressive and unfair toward the royal family. Supporters of the Duchess argued that much of that coverage came down to bias or cultural misunderstanding. And for a long time, that explanation held weight. But now something feels different, and people are noticing it fast. This time, the conversation isn't coming from tabloids or anonymous voices online. It's coming straight from inside Hollywood, and that changes everything. Kevin Costner isn't a gossip writer or some random commentator. He's a respected name in the same industry Harry and Meghan stepped into when they built their post-royal life. His voice carries serious influence among producers, investors, and executives who help decide what projects get made and who gets opportunities. So when someone like that speaks, even briefly, it doesn't just stay small, it spreads fast and lands hard. As that shift in perception started taking hold, the implications became impossible to ignore. If the entertainment industry begins to see the Sussex brand as a risk instead of an opportunity, that changes the entire game. The California-based path they built, the deals, the projects, the long-term vision could suddenly face real uncertainty. And that raises a bigger question people are starting to ask more openly. What happens if the brand they built stops working in the very place it was meant to thrive? And right in the middle of it all stands Prince Harry, caught between two worlds that both seem to be shifting at the same time. Once seen as a widely admired royal with strong military ties and global respect, he's now navigating one of the most complicated moments of his public life. As 2026 began unfolding, observers started noticing a clear pattern, and it didn't go unnoticed for long. Compared to earlier years, where many of his appearances were closely tied to Meghan and their shared projects, Harry has been showing up more and more on his own. At first, the change was subtle, easy to overlook, but over time, it became harder to ignore, and people started asking what might be behind it. One of the clearest moments showing this shift came during events tied to the Invictus Games, the international competition Prince Harry created to support wounded and injured military veterans. It's a cause deeply connected to his identity, and this time, it felt more personal than ever. As he traveled to Canada to promote the next phase of the Games, cameras followed closely. He was seen connecting with athletes, speaking with military families, and working alongside organizers. But noticeably, he was doing it mostly on his own. The scenes felt familiar to those who have followed Harry for years. In those moments, he seemed to step back into the role that once defined his public image within the royal family. He spoke with confidence about resilience, recovery, and honoring those who served. And it struck a chord with many watching. Then, not long after, another major appearance unfolded, this time thousands of miles away in Angola. Harry joined humanitarian groups working to clear landmines from regions still impacted by past conflicts, and the mission carried deep emotional weight. Decades earlier, Princess Diana had brought global attention to the same issue, walking through a minefield in protective gear in a moment that became historic. Now, seeing Harry in a similar space felt powerful, almost like history repeating itself in a new way. His presence in Angola reminded people of the humanitarian side that once made him one of the most respected and admired figures in the royal family. It brought back that connection to purpose, service, and global impact that many still associate with him. But at the same time, these appearances also highlighted something deeper, a quiet tension surrounding where he stands today. While Harry continues focusing on meaningful causes tied to service and humanitarian work, questions about his place in both worlds are only getting louder. The wider controversy surrounding Meghan Markle hasn't slowed down. It's still dominating headlines across the world. And with every public appearance, Prince Harry is being pulled into a tough position where he has to balance two very different realities. On one side, there's his loyalty to his wife and the life they built together in California after stepping away from royal duties. On the other side, there's growing pressure from Britain, where conversations about the monarchy's reputation and possible serious responses are getting louder. For Harry, this isn't just public, it's deeply personal. His identity was once fully tied to the royal institution, shaped by military service, charity work, and strong connections with veterans. He was seen as a symbol of duty, strength, and resilience. But the path he chose in recent years has taken him into a completely different world. Now, media deals, Hollywood partnerships, and celebrity networks play a major role in his day-to-day life. And that shift hasn't come without challenges. At this point, those two worlds don't seem to be moving together. They're pulling in opposite directions. The life Harry and Meghan built in Montecito depends on a careful mix of royal legacy and Hollywood opportunity, but that balance is starting to look unstable. As criticism continues to grow on both sides, from the UK and from inside California's entertainment circles, that foundation feels more fragile than ever. And after Kevin Costner's unexpected comments sent shockwaves through both spaces, people are starting to question if this is the moment everything begins to change. Some are wondering if this could be the turning point in the long and complicated story of the Sussex, something bigger than just headlines and public appearances. So now the question is, what do you think is really going on here? Did Kevin Costner's remarks spark Hollywood pulling back, pressure inside the palace, and Harry standing more alone? Or is there an even bigger twist still coming? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe for more updates.